The auctioneer's voice cracked in the cold morning air, but it wasn't the sound that made the crowd fall silent. It was the sight of her, the young widow standing on the wooden platform, shawl clutched tight, her infant pressed against her chest as if she feared someone might snatch him away even before the bidding began. Dust rolled across the yard, catching the edges of her trembling breath, while the men gathered around shifted in a mixture of impatience and discomfort. Everyone knew this wasn't livestock. But the town was desperate, and debts were debts, even if they came wrapped in grief. A baby whimpered. The widow swallowed hard. Assets seized by order of marshal and county judge, the auctioneer declared, trying to force routine into a moment that would never feel normal. She goes with the child. They cannot be separated. And they cannot remain in town. A murmur swelled. No one stepped forward. A few men looked away, ashamed of their own curiosity. And then came the sound, a single horse approaching from the ridge, hooves slow, deliberate, like the rider wasn't in any hurry to join the ugliness unfolding. Heads turned as dust parted and a lone figure appeared against the morning sun. A tall man, coat long, hat low, riding a roan with the posture of someone who'd spent more years in the saddle than under a roof. The widow's eyes lifted for the first time. The stranger didn't wear a badge. He didn't carry the swagger of a rancher. He carried something heavier, quiet purpose. He rode right up to the platform and stopped so close the horse's breath fogged against the widow's skirt. "I'll take them," he said. The crowd erupted, gasps, curses, the scrape of boots stepping back. The auctioneer stared at him as though he hadn't heard right. "Sir, you haven't." "I said I'll take them," the stranger repeated, voice steady as stone. He dismounted, reached into his coat, and drew out a leather pouch heavy enough to land on the platform with a thud that killed all further argument. The widow's child stirred. She clutched him tighter. The stranger turned his face up to her, and though his expression didn't change, something in his eyes softened, just barely. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "if you'll come with me." Before she could answer, a rider crested the far ridge at a full gallop, shouting something the crowd couldn't yet make out, something urgent enough to turn every head and stiffen every spine. The rider barreled down the slope, hat nearly torn from his head, coat flapping like a warning flag. His horse slid to a halt in a shower of dust, and he pointed straight at the widow and the stranger. "Don't move, Em," he shouted. "Not yet." Tension rippled across the yard. The widow froze. The stranger didn't. He stepped between her and the approaching rider with quiet precision, one hand resting near his holster but not drawing. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise that he would stand between her and whatever storm was rolling in. The marshal pushed his way through the crowd. "What's the meaning of this?" The breathless rider pointed again, this time with fear plain in his eyes. "Her husband's brothers, they're comin'. Angry. Armed. They say no outsiders talkin' kin's blood." A hush swallowed the yard. Everyone knew the Phelps brothers, 3 men with tempers like lit fuses and a fondness for solving disputes with gun barrels rather than courtrooms. The auctioneer wiped sweat from his brow. "We already called the bid. It's done." "Not if they say otherwise," someone muttered. The widow's lips trembled. "Please," she whispered to the marshal, "I just want my child safe." The stranger turned back to her. "Ma'am. I can take you away from here before they arrive. But once you ride with me, there's no turning back. People will talk. Men will follow." She looked at the ground, then at her baby's sleeping face. "Why would you help me? You don't even know my name." "I don't need your name to know what's right," he said softly. The marshal eyed him. "You taking responsibility for her? For the babe? For whatever comes after?" "I am," the stranger answered without hesitation. The widow's breath caught. A single decision stood between safety and the unknown. She nodded. The stranger helped her down from the platform, lifting her and the child as though they weighed nothing. Gasps spread through the crowd like sparks. But before they could reach his horse, the breathless rider whispered, voice dropping to a terrified rasp. They're already in the valley. I saw smoke. They're burnin' fences as they come. The marshal blanched. Dear God, they're closer than we thought. The first plume of smoke curled into the sky like a finger pointing straight at them. A second followed. Then a distant gunshot cracked through the morning, sharp enough to send the horses stamping in panic. The widow clutched her baby. The stranger guided her toward his roan. We ride now, he said. Hold the child tight. But the marshal stepped forward. You can't outrun them. They know this land better'n anyone alive. We're not outrunnin', the stranger replied. We're outthinkin'. He lifted the widow into the saddle and swung up behind her, one arm bracing her, the other steady on the reins. The baby stirred but didn't cry. The crowd scattered as three riders appeared at the far end of the yard, silhouettes first, then the unmistakable bulk of the Phelps brothers. Their horses barreled forward at a dead run, faces twisted with fury. There, the eldest roared. Gunfire erupted, wild, angry shots that kicked dust at the stranger's boots. He wheeled the roan sharply. Hold on, he shouted. The horse bolted down the narrow alley between sheds just as more shots cracked behind them. Splinters flew from wagon boards. Chickens scattered. The widow pressed her cheek to the stranger's chest, whispering frantic prayers. They burst into the lower pasture, hoofs churning mud. The stranger leaned low over the widow, shielding her and the child with his own body as a bullet tore through the air where her head had been a heartbeat before. Why are they doing this? She gasped. Because hatred's the only thing they've ever raised right, he answered. The Phelps brothers split apart behind them, one circling wide, cutting off the riverbank, another firing from the ridge, the eldest barreling straight down the center like a runaway locomotive. The stranger guided the roan toward the canyon mouth, its walls narrowing like the throat of a trap. The widow realized the danger too late. They'll pin us in, she cried. They think so, he murmured. As they entered the canyon, he yanked the reins hard, veering into a side cut barely wide enough for the horse to slip through. Branches scraped. Rocks clattered. Behind them, the Phelps brothers thundered past, missing the turn entirely. For a breath, it seemed they had escaped. Then a rifle shot echoed from the cliff above, closer than any before, and a voice boomed down, You can't hide her, stranger. She's Phelps' blood. The stranger's face hardened. He knew that voice. They sheltered beneath an overhang where the canyon wall bowed inward, forming a rough pocket of shade. The roan trembled with exhaustion. The widow's hands shook as she checked her child, who, miraculously, had drifted back into uneasy sleep. The stranger scanned the ridges above. The Phelps brothers had split up again. They weren't far. How do you know them? She whispered. He hesitated before answering. I rode with their family, long enough to regret it. Their father took me in when I was young, gave me work. But there was a cruelty in him that seeped into everything. I left when I realized what he expected me to become. Her eyes softened. And now you risk your life for mine. He looked at her, truly looked, as if trying to make sense of a choice he'd made before understanding why. I couldn't watch them take you. Not like that. She shifted the baby in her arms. My husband, he wasn't like them. He wanted a quiet life, but after he died, his brothers saw only debt. Said the baby belonged to the Phelps line, not to me. They wanted him raised their way. Hard. Mean. The stranger's jaw clenched. That child deserves better. Silence settled, a fragile, human quiet. The widow reached into her shawl and pulled out a small cloth bundle. Inside was a silver locket, scratched and worn. It was his, she murmured. My husband's. I want you to have it. I can't. Please. So you'll remember you saved something of him, not just me. He took the locket gently, the way one might accept a newborn. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the roan's ears shot forward. Boot steps. crunching gravel. The widow sucked in a breath. The stranger's hand drifted toward his revolver, though he knew 6 bullets would not stop 3 men on high ground. "They'll kill you," she whispered. "Not if I give them what they want," he said, voice low. Her eyes filled with terror. "No." But he stood anyway, shoulders squared, the weight of her husband's locket heavy in his palm. As he stepped out into the open, sunlight cutting across his coat, the eldest Phelps brother emerged from the rocks above, rifle aimed, and smile cold. The eldest Phelps brother, Brannock, descended the slope with the lazy confidence of a man who believed victory was already in his pocket. His rifle tracked the stranger with something almost personal in its precision. "Well, I'll be," Brannock drawled. "Thought you'd keep riding forever, boy. Didn't expect you'd come crawling back." The stranger didn't move. "I'm not crawling. And I'm not coming back." Brannock spat. "You took what's ours. She's not property." "That baby carries Phelps' blood," Brannock snapped. "That means he belongs with us. He belongs with his mother." The second and third brothers appeared along the ridge, pinning the canyon in a vise. The widow clutched her baby, hidden just beyond the bend, heart pounding like a trapped bird. Brannock stepped closer, boots grinding gravel. "I'll make this simple. Hand over the child. We'll let the woman go. As for you, I might even let you walk away, old friend." The stranger looked up at him, remembering the nights he'd spent under the Phelps roof, the lessons drilled into him, the violence he'd been expected to carry like a family heirloom. "No," he said quietly. "You taught me everything wrong. I won't let you raise that boy." Brannock's smile thinned. "Then you die." He lifted the rifle. The shot cracked, echoing through the canyon. Brannock staggered. For a frozen heartbeat, no one understood what had happened. Then the stranger saw it, the widow at the bend, both hands shaking as she held the marshal's old pistol. Smoke curled from the barrel. Brannock collapsed to one knee, fury twisting his face. "You." The stranger acted, drawing faster than breath. 2 shots rang out, disarming the brothers on the ridge and sending them scrambling behind rocks. Brannock lunged for his weapon, but the stranger kicked it away. "Enough," the stranger growled. "This ends here." Brannock looked up, hatred and disbelief warring in his eyes. "You'd kill us? After everything we gave you?" "You gave me nothing but scars," the stranger said. "I'm choosing a different life." Brannock reached for a hidden knife. The stranger didn't hesitate. One final shot. Dust lifted. Silence settled. The remaining brothers froze. Their leader lay still. The stranger looked up at them. "Go. Don't follow her again." Something in his voice, final, unbreakable, sent them riding off without another word. Hours later, the 3 of them, stranger, widow, and child, returned to the open plains where the light fell easier. She rode beside him now, no longer lifted, no longer frightened. "Where will you take us?" she asked softly. "Where you choose," he answered. "You're free now." She studied him, the locket glinting at his chest. "You saved us. You could have ridden on, but you didn't." He held her gaze. "I reckon I didn't want to." The baby stirred. The sun dipped low. Wind moved gently through the sage as though the land itself exhaled. Years later, the boy would remember none of the gunfire, none of the fear, only the steady warmth of the man who'd carried him to safety. But on that day, as the stranger and the widow rode side by side into the fading gold, only one truth remained: sometimes a family isn't born. Sometimes it's chosen.